Hi everyone! As you may know from my previous video, I have finally bought the last book from Showell, and the last book being she published 4 books, and that was the only one I didn't have. I was buying them slowly one by one, and somehow I couldn't resist and I wanted to have all of them. So some of you have been asking me how different is it to other books, etc. So I wanted to show you a little bit of this book so you get a better understanding. So this book was actually the first one that she published, and it was first published as a hardcover in 2006, and then it was published as paperback in 2014. So let's have a look inside. Beautiful illustration, and then of course, as always, there's a fantastic illustration on the opening page. I love that her illustrations are included in parts like contents and, you know, publishing details, and even here on the title page, because quite often these pages are left blank, but I say that with all of her books, so I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it is quite pretty. You know, you have an introduction over here, and then a beautiful illustration of cherry blossom next to it. So if you've taken her online classes, or actually I think there is a video on YouTube where she talks about drawing on the back on the lid of an ice cream box. I think this was her original ice cream box lid that she used as a palette, and then that's how it all started for her, that she realized that this sort of layout is the most convenient for her in terms of having paints squeezed out next to each other like this on the edges, and then having the middle area for mixing watercolors. And you can see this palette over here again, so I think it's really neat because she talked about it, and seeing how it all started is a very neat thing. And then she progressed to the ceramic palette. Okay, so the idea is very similar, and this is why I like it, because sometimes you know, the style of a book can change. If an artist does, for example, their first book, and then many years later they do their latest book, you can kind of look back and see that the styles are quite different. The layout of the books are very similar from the first to the 4th book, and by that I mean you get the beautiful illustration, then you get a pencil drawing, you get bits of information to read and learn. So I really like that, and like I said, if you have seen my previous Showell book reviews, then you know that I don't show every single page because, you know, I don't want to spoil it and it's unfair on the artist. So I think I'll just show you a few that I really like, and then you can make your mind up whether that's something you'd like to have as well. So here is the original. How many colors did I count? Let's see. So that's 6 and 6, that's 12, and another 3. So 15 colors in her, shall I say, original color palette, and those are Winsor & Newton, and that's interesting to see. So I'm going to do a separate video where actually I'm going to have a brief comparison of the 4 books, so that you can see there and then all of her books, and see what illustration she's focusing on. I found that was the case, that you know, every book would have a very wide range of illustration, but there would be always something. For example, as you will see in this book, it's the orchids and roses. That is a very nice range and variety of them here, and quite a few illustrations. Whereas if you look in her other books, there is always a rose present, but not so much. So if you are into roses, then it would be worth getting this book. So I will do a short comparison of all four, hopefully next week, if I can. So and then I also will look at her watercolors that she changes from book to book, because there are a few years between publishing those books, and so of course she would change her palette slightly. Interesting for me to see which colors she swapped. So we'll do that as well. Now let's go ahead and have a look at the things that I really like. Orchid. And you'll see what I mean here. You've got quite a few beautiful orchids which really make you want to give it a go. So it doesn't look too complicated. It looks achievable, yet it looks beautiful. So here are some orchids. Then on this next page, there's a step-by-step orchid illustration. And then I will show you. So lilies, of course, very beautiful. And her, that's the one on the cover, this flower here. Her illustrations never repeat. I mean, from book to book, there's never a... So she will, for example, paint a lily in a few books, but it will be a completely different lily, so that's great. I love this illustration as well. It's sort of very, very classic botanical illustration. I love the style of it. I also noticed that there is a great deal of foliage in this book, which I didn't seem... I mean, there is foliage in every book, but it seemed that here there was a lot more of it. So here is the more of the orchid. When I said to you this book has a lot of orchid, and if you love that, then you'd find it quite useful. So here she talks about the materials that she's going to use, and then the basic mixes. So she tells you the watercolors, and of course, because you know what Winsor Newton watercolor she uses from her palette, you can easily get those. Or if you don't want to buy or have the exact same paint, you can just look through your existing watercolor collection and pick out the right colors, basically. So here is a really great spread on the orchid. So essentially it's got quite a few pages, and that's what I really, really like. It's beautiful. Also, I love the fact that she doesn't copy everything as she sees. What I like about Billy, if you look at this part of the orchid, she's not doing exactly what is here, but instead she's trying to highlight what she sees and bring out a sort of more of a detail, rather than just making it very, very dark as it is here. And that's what I like. Same thing on this petal here. So yeah, great detailing here. And then even further you can see then she also does a combination of, so she took basically, if you go back, I thought that was very interesting. So she took two different orchids, one being slightly more closed looking, and I think that might be a slightly different variety with this one, and she basically combined and made a composition as if this is sort of one plant, although you can see that she added it separately here to the illustration, but it looks so beautiful. So you have the option to do that as well if you want, or just leave it and do one of the orchids. So you can see how many pages, and it still goes on. So like I said, if you're into orchids, I think this book, Orchids and Roses, you would really, really enjoy. So there's this pattern, which I would never know how to even begin painting this type of orchid leaf. But so she shows it here, where to start and how to go on, and then slowly getting there. And I think this is the finishing touches, where she adds this little optional part, I guess. If you want, you can add that. If not, you just leave it at that, probably. So that's her own style of putting a little corner here, which I haven't noticed in the other books, but it's quite nice, quite a nice idea. Just a triangle sharp edge. So yeah, and that's the finished result. Very, very beautiful. And then if you want even more, you've got a few more here. So I absolutely love it. So that's the orchid part, and I also want to show you the roses. So here is the rose section. Now, I personally always struggle with roses. The point is that I really would love to learn how to paint roses. And you can see, like, this rose doesn't look too complicated, but once you start painting it, you do realize that it is actually complicated. So then she dedicates quite a few pages as well to explain how to paint the middle part, which is super detailed in a rose, depending what kind of bud it is. If it's an open one like this one, then you'll see a lot of these stamen and pollen, or if it's a closed one, then it'll have a great deal of different petals and all that complication. And so she goes through explaining how to do that, and also the rose buds as well. I love rosebuds, painting them especially. They are probably the easier part of the rose. And then she also looks at the leaves and separate items of the rose. So it's all very, very neat, step by step. So it almost makes you feel like you're taking a tutorial. Very, very detailed explanation here, which I absolutely love, so I'm very happy. And then here is the illustration, and then a few more. How beautiful are these? Just super stunning. I mean, the great detail in this, that's a little bit too complicated for me, but it's stunning to look at. You know, on one of those rainy afternoons where you feel like having a cup of tea and just flicking through a beautiful watercolor book filled with beautiful illustrations of flowers and getting inspired to do something. So that's it. Then I always like to show you the last illustration, and the last one in the book is this one of the beautiful gladioli, and they're arranged in a beautiful manner. So I hope you got a better idea of this book. It's beautiful. What can I say? So yeah, thanks for watching, and like I said, there will be a short comparison of all 4 books next week, hopefully. Once again, thanks for watching, and see you soon.